everybody. We're back. Episode 22, presented by SodaStick.com. The Bardown Beauts. What's going on? Hope everyone had a great week. Alexis, how are you doing? Still hanging in there?
Tired. Just another day.
I know.
Another day.
It's just,
At least it's sunny
like
out.
Groundhog's Day. It is.
Yeah.
It's a gorgeous week this week too, which I'm super jacked about.
It's more manageable to go through this when you can go outside and in a t-shirt and shorts or even a swimsuit if you want to get your tan on. This is bearable when the weather is nice.
That I'm going to be putting my swimsuit on later? That's 100% what I'm going to be doing.
I am too. Hey, are we done yet? Because I'm going to hit the deck after this.
But we got some stuff to talk about. I do love that there's always at least a little bit of news for us. It keeps us relevant. It keeps us going.
Dangling the carrot in front of the donkey is what it is. Yeah.
Exactly. The AHL officially canceled their season, which is bigger news because they've kind of been on hiatus like the NHL. The NHL still has not officially canceled the 2019-20 season. And now the AHL said, nay, we're not going to do it. We're not going to name a Calder champion. First time since 1936. Shout out to my colleague at NHL.com, John Lane, for that little tidbit. So I think that it could be indicative of what the NHL might do. I mean, Gary Bettman has been very adamant that they do not want to cancel it, but when your minor league affiliates all say no, I wonder how much that shakes the bear.
Well, and I've seen a lot of people more so lately, and I know you and I kind of gave our opinions on this a few episodes ago about how we kind of were hoping this was all going to unfold. And I've seen a lot more people kind of saying what we've been saying for a little while, where it's honestly, at this point, just don't even give it to us anymore. And I saw some stuff come out where they were showing some of the modifications they'd have to make to gameplay to make it safer and more hygienic and all that stuff. And I was reading through some of them, this isn't hockey. And a lot of people were saying that too. They're no scrums, no fighting, no spitting, no this, no that. And I'm you
can't even, how do you sit on a bench? That's the whole team sits together on a bench. How do you do any of that?
And I think my sister said something the other day. We were talking about it at dinner, and she was I don't know how you just don't do that. It's so automatic in sports, especially in hockey, to just spit. How do you just tell your body, don't do that or you're going to get a penalty or something?
Right. Well, and it's funny. My husband and I were talking about that because Korean baseball has resumed. And so they're playing that, and they were saying all the modifications that they have had to make. And there's one pitcher who has been fined so much money because he's literally before I throw the ball, I spit. I can't help it. That's what I do. It's not, that's what I do. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, could you imagine scoring a goal and not going into the boards with your teammates? It's a bizarre thing. And again, I stand by, of course I miss hockey. I miss playoff hockey even more. Yeah. But it's just, is it worth it? To what level do you need to bring it back? And part of me feels if you're going to take the players and lock them in hotel rooms and then expect them to perform, it feels very animalistic a little bit. All right, monkey, go dance for us. What? Right. No, that doesn't seem right. So no, it'll be interesting. Another interesting hockey fact, no Kaprizov. He has not signed with the Wild yet. I think everybody was expecting him to do. No concern necessarily. He still doesn't have an agent. And the great Mike Russo had an article on The Athletic kind of outlining everything that's going on.
I think Michael Russo single-handedly ruined everyone's day when he put that tweet out.
100%.
I mean, we love Russo, and the article was very good, but it was so funny because everyone was why? Why did this have to come out? Everyone's
you can't have good things
barely
in
hanging on, and Russo's by the way, Kaprizov is also not probably going to be coming this year, and everyone's what the hell?
I know. It's just, which, I mean, it makes sense. If you read it, sure, you can't, I mean, it is. It's a bizarre situation. It's just a very weird thing. You can't pull a Cal McCarr and jump right into the season. And it's a different situation. So hopefully he will sign. We will see him eventually. Patience, guys, patience. Yeah. It'll be okay.
I saw a lot of people say too, which I thought was a good point, that they were maybe this is a good thing to give him a chance to come into a full season and not this awkward halfway semi-canceled season with all these modifications.
With no
they
spitting.
were they were maybe this is a good thing. I was that's a good point. If it were me coming into my first season in a league, I think I would probably want to do it where it's as normal as possible. So obviously we don't know how Kaprizov feels about all that, but I can see that that's a good point, and maybe that would be more beneficial to give him a chance to mesh better in a more normal setting. So I don't know. I'm just trying to find positives because this whole Kaprizov roller coaster is really just taking a lot out of me.
Yeah. I mean, again, it'll be great. And I do need to reiterate though, when he does come, guys, be patient with him there too, because it's North American hockey and it's a totally different style of game than what he was used to. It's not only that, but it's NHL hockey too.
And he's
so
like literally a child. So like,
yes.
let's just pump the brakes, give him a minute.
Be kind of nice. And speaking of being nice, we do want to give some love and thanks to all the feedback. Like I said, we talked a little bit heavy last week on Brendan Leipzig's comments, but we got a lot of really good feedback, and I am glad we talked about it. Again, we're not going to turn it into a weekly thing where we need to hate on men or anything like that, but it was nice to get that conversation going. So I think we'll see more conversations about that in the future, not just for us, but in general, which is good. And hopefully people learned a thing or two about being kind to one another.
It's important to cover those things, and like we said in the last episode, hopefully it's not something we have to talk about every week or even rarely. Right. But glad that we touched on it and that you guys received it well.
Yeah. And speaking of women and women's hockey, a little bit of drama going on. A lot of drama. There has been a lot of drama. Not to say girls, but girls, right? Like, I don't know. There was some accusations kind of on how the NWHL treats players, but then there's been always a constant battle between the PWHPA as well, which is trying to start its own thing. There was news breaking that they are going to have tryouts in 5 different regions, Minnesota being one of them, 3 of them up in Canada. And then the Super Rink will host tryouts and events too, which is exciting because Minnesota, you'll have it here, but that means now you have 2 high-end elite women's teams and leagues to follow here in Minnesota. And again, probably some conflict there. I mean, Alexis, what's your take? That's your kind of world a little bit.
Yeah.
It's exciting to see things kind of move forward on both sides, but I think there's still a lot of hurdles that each league has to jump through.
Yeah, it's tough because and you guys listening for the most part know that I'm in the NWHL world. I work with the Whitecaps, but I also know a lot about the PWHPA and how that goes down because there's a lot of crossover with the understanding of those leagues, and a lot of the players used to play in the NWHL now play in PWHPA league and vice versa. So there's a lot there, and it's a lot to unpack, and it is stressful because you want to see good things happening with women's hockey. You want to see advancements. You want to see new opportunities come up. You want to see new achievements reached and new recognition and stuff like that. But there are hurdles when it comes to these kind of things. And, I was thinking a lot about this week, and there's hurdles like this with any new league. And we've touched on this before, and we've talked about it, but think about, in the older days of the NHL, there was contract disputes all the time because players felt they weren't getting paid enough and they weren't. Right. And so it's very similar to that, where they were still kind of working through the kinks of that and figuring out, okay, what can we pay these players? How is this going to work? We talked about it in our episode with Lou Nanny. He talked about how he was mad because he wasn't getting paid enough and all of this. So
he still harbors that resentment too. It's amazing. I love it.
And that was a long time ago. So it's, there's a lot of stuff like that will happen when it comes to sports and when teams and leagues are still trying to figure things out. And it's sad because women's hockey already has enough problems trying to make themselves relevant in the sports world, and it shouldn't be that way. People should care just as much about that as they care about any other league. If you're a sports fan, you should care about women's sports just as much as men's sports. It doesn't mean you have to watch them equally, but it means you should want them to have equal opportunities. And so to what Jessi is referencing, basically for anyone who didn't see it, there was an article that was put out kind of about the struggles that a lot of NWHL players went through when they played in the league. Most of them, I believe, are no longer in the league, so they're either PWHPA or just not playing right now. I can't remember exactly. It was about a week ago since I read the article, but they basically were anonymous players saying this is what it was like when I played, and they were talking about some things that they went through, some injustices and all this stuff that made it hard to play in the league, or what they believe made it hard to play in the league. Some of it was just a matter of, some of it was money, some of it was travel related, some of it was just conditions at the rink, the way that coaches treated some of the players, all that stuff. The nice thing is there wasn't too many Minnesota players or mentioned. A lot of it was very Boston and Connecticut based. Mm-hmm. But it was really sad to read because, for me, as someone who works in the NWHL and works alongside these players and has gotten to know a lot of these players, whether it's personally or through social media or whatever it is, it was really disappointing to see so many bad and sad things said about the league that I get to be that I'm lucky enough to be a part of. But if there's anything that I got out of it, and I saw a lot of people saying this, a lot of people, NWHL people saying this. So I think that a lot of us are on the same page when it comes to this. But a lot of people were just saying the important thing is that a lot of those things they said, yeah, a lot of those things are true or were true at one point, but they're making changes and working hard to make sure those are no longer the case, that there is better treatment, there is more pay, that travel does get easier, all of this stuff. And I thought that was the most important thing after reading the article and seeing the responses of players in the league or media members. A lot of people were just saying that it's important to recognize your downfalls, whether you're an organization, a person, whatever it is, you do need to understand those things so that you can make a change. And a lot of the players were saying, yeah, we do know there is issues, and we're not perfect. We're working our way to create a better league for these players, and that this stuff takes time. And so I thought that was a really positive way that these players and stuff were looking at it, because a lot of people were really disappointed to see the article, and it was
very unflattering, right? Unfortunately,
yeah.
it really was. Like, it didn't put the best light on the NWHL and what they're trying to do. It definitely, it wasn't great. It was, there's some PR. It was, I think the thing that stuck out with me, resonated with me, was one of the players mentioning that she had to pee in a trash bin because of the locker rooms, and she wasn't able to get, off the ice. It was just, it's kind of like makes you step back and realize, like, well, why? And then you look at the millions of dollars NHL players make, and it's like, but why? It's sad. But like you said, that's growing pains too. I mean, the NWHL is still a very young, you think of it like a young company. I mean, it's a business. Sports are a business, and they don't have the funding and the backing like the men's sports do, unfortunately. Casey Bellamy, a U.S. Olympian who also plays professional hockey, had kind of put out a quote on Friday that said, "We practice at 6 a.m. or 9 p.m. with most times 5 to 7 skaters twice a week, lugging our equipment around from house to car to rink, washing our undergear, finding places to get our skates sharpened, paying for physio, massage, and gym memberships, all while balancing a full-time job." That's the reality, unfortunately, right now for professional women's hockey, no matter which league that you're going for, because the PWHPA has not figured it out either, right? Like, neither one is getting players paid accordingly or taken care of. So it's all sad. I mean, there's no way around it. It sucks for these women who love the game. At the end of the day, they'll do it. They'll go through those stripes. I know when we had Allie Thunstrom on, it was 9:00 at night, right before practice, that she had worked
walked
all
into
day.
the room with her hockey bag, her 3 or 4 hockey sticks, and she left to practice right after. It was. And I think another thing that I pulled out of this, I was trying to find the positives after I read this, because so many people were disappointed by it, and understandably so. I was disappointed seeing it too, but I'm thinking, okay, how can we turn this into something positive? How can we use this to advance the league, to make changes? And something else I thought too was that if all of these people are coming out and saying, hey, this was what it was like when I played for this team or in this league, and the league is still kicking, there's still a new team is just added, we've got players who still want to play in the league, that just goes to show that if what they're saying is true, or even if there is some truth to what these anonymous players were saying, that just goes to show that the players in the league really want to freaking play hockey. I mean, seriously, if they're saying all this stuff, and there's still 6 teams now who want to play in this league, and however many players on a roster, and coaches and staff and all of that, that just goes to show they really care about this sport, which goes to show that we should continue to fight for them. If all these things are happening and all these players still want to play, then it's up to the league, the people who support the league, to make those changes so that they can play comfortably, make money. I mean, it's a sad situation, but you just got to keep fighting. That's what it is. As soon as you back down and you say it's just going to be this way, then it's always going to be that way. You have to try to find a way to make advancements, make changes, and give these players the opportunity to play hockey like they so desperately want to do, and they deserve to do. They're some of the best players in the world. So it's important that these kind of things are talked about. Again, it's not fun to talk about this stuff and say there's this division and say there's this and say there's that, but we have to talk about about it so that people can know about it and attention can be brought to it and changes can be made. And I love being a part of the NWHL community. It's a great community. I've met a lot of awesome players, media people, the fans, people who just work at the rink. So many people that I've been so blessed to come in contact with and become friends with. So it matters to me that this league is a positive place for these players to play the sport that they love and that they're very good at. So yeah, a little disappointing news coming out this week, but a lot of positives that we can take from it and hopefully move forward. And this is the kind of news we get when the leagues are suspended. We don't get exciting news. We get crappy news.
No, exactly. Well, and I mean, you nailed it, right? You said kind of everything that I could have said too. In addition though, instead of complaining again, support these women, support the league. Like it similar to Big Ten hockey. Like you can't keep complaining about it, like support it. Like you want to see change that relies on you guys too. So continue to help these women along, and say, yes, I would support this. I want to go to these games. I want this merchandise. I want these women to get paid. I mean, be vocal about it too. There's nothing wrong with that to say like, yes, let's make a change. Let's make something happen. So, because again, they're amazing women with amazing skill, amazing ability. And, they just love the game, man. It's
just like all of you listening. You love watching. They love playing. It's they don't want the sport taken away from them. Just like we don't enjoy not watching hockey. They don't enjoy not being able to play hockey. So give them those opportunities, even if it's just like spending money for the sponsors of the league. Like go get a Dunkin' Donuts coffee. They sponsor the league. That the NWHL
Budweiser guys.
money.
Budweiser. They have Budweiser too. So go for that.
Yeah, seriously, go spend your money at the sponsors if you can't make it to a game or if whatever it is. So there's a million ways that you can support them, and easy ways you can support them too. Like a coffee is what, $5? You're supporting the league by going to get a coffee at Dunkin' Donuts. So it's really that easy if you want to make it that easy. So
exactly, just do it. I do have to bring up. It was funny. I saw somebody. So you know how they had the logos on social media where it was like you see this logo, and the Whitecaps did it, and somebody was like, Jessi Pierce. I don't even know if she played, and I was like. Okay. I mean, yay. I love growing. Like, that's hilarious. So thank you. Shout out to that person that saw the Whitecaps and thought of me.
Good for you, Jessi. You go, girl. They should hang your jersey in the rafters.
I know. I was like, I think they meant some other Jessi maybe. Like, I'm not quite sure where to go with that. But
the best player who never played.
Hang my jersey up. Retire that one. That's number 22 to the rafters, please. Before we get to our next guest, Mike Snee, Executive Director of Cawlidge Hockey Inc., want to give a shout out to our presenting sponsors, SodaStick.com. We love them. They're the best. They got a lot of cool new stuff coming out. Super excited for this McGolden Light Fishing Club line to drop. That hasn't yet, but what has dropped is the Wally's My Beer Man shirt, which is pretty epic. Alexis, do you know Wally the Beer Man?
I do know Wally the Beer Man.
Okay, good. I'm proud of you.
Jessi's assuming because I'm like 7. I don't know anybody.
Look at you, didn't know the Metrodome? Like, he was a big Metrodome
okay,
guy.
I knew. I just forgot where it was. I'm not sure.
Okay. Met Center. God damn.
Anyway.
Yes. And did you order your socks? Did you get your Soda Stick socks?
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Very excited.
Always good stuff there at Soda Stick. Drop that Bardown Beauties code at checkout for free shipping. We'll be right back with Mike Snee. And we're back. Joining us now, Mike Snee, Executive Director of Cawlidge Hockey Inc. Mike, how you doing? How you holding up?
Today feels a lot like yesterday, but I'm sure it's the same for both of you and everybody watching or listening. So I'm doing pretty well. My family's doing pretty well. Thank you.
I know. I feel like that days are no longer existence. Like it's not Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. It's today, tomorrow, and yesterday. I think that's a more appropriate way to approach the calendar.
That's a great way. I haven't looked at it that way, but yes, although it is nice with the weather getting better, that has added some variety, I guess.
Right.
I thought it was Saturday for like 3 days straight, but I told Jessi in our first segment, I said, it helps when the weather's nice because at least we can take indoor activities outside, read a book outside, sit on your computer outside. At least we're not cooped up in the house. So it feels better when the weather's in the 70s and the 80s than in the, 40s and raining. So
yeah, exactly. So, but no, everything's pretty good. I'd love to be watching some playoff hockey right now and talking about who won the Frozen Four, but it's just not the way it is.
I know. I mean, not to kick things off on a sour note, but no Frozen Four this year. College hockey comes to abrupt end like every other sport. I mean, talk a little bit about what that meant to college hockey and kind of what a disappointment that was to not be able to have the coveted tournament at the end of the year.
Yeah. I mean, everything you just said, but at the same time, everybody else is in the same circumstances. So whether it was college hockey, college basketball, NHL hockey, whatever it might be. And in fact, I think it's interesting that the last real thing that I was watching was the state high school boys tournament. If you, which I'm sure, Jess, you were pretty happy that day. But
yeah, go Zaps.
I think about that, and then I think it was maybe 2 or 3 days later that the situation with the NBA game, and then that's what was the first domino, and every domino following. But it just feels like it was so long ago. I guess it was 2 months ago, but it feels like it was longer than that. But from a college hockey standpoint, we were just on the verge of really the reason we play. Conference tournaments were going to be that weekend, and then, or I should say conference playoffs, and then conference tournaments the next weekend, and ultimately the Frozen Four. And a lot of great local storylines here with a couple of schools in the state. I mean, Bemidji State was having an excellent year. Mankato had been number one for a good part of the year. And, of course, Duluth was looking to do something that hasn't been done since the 50s. That's on the men's side. On the women's side, we had a lot of great stories, too, especially one out east with both Cornell, the men's and women's programs being number one in the country for a good part of the year. And I think that's how the season ended, actually, with both of them number one. I think I have to look at that. But so the analogy I use, it's like you're reading a good book, and you get to like the last 2 chapters and the pages are empty. You don't know what happened. And full disclosure, I don't read many books. So but it's a bummer, but we're all in the same boat. We're all suffering the same storm, I guess. So we're not the only ones.
And I suppose, go ahead, Alexis.
I was just going to say, talking about the Frozen Four, you mentioned that is part of the most exciting parts of the year for college hockey. Do you have any predictions on what you thought that might have looked like if the season would have shaken out? We were getting close. I know a lot of people were getting excited about postseason play and kind of who the champs might be. Do you have any predictions what it might have looked like?
The organization I work for, I technically represent, not technically, I do. I represent all now 61 Division I men's programs, the little nonprofit. So I basically root for the officials.
There you go. You can't lose then.
Good calls. and so we don't have a situation where the Frozen Four is won perhaps on a missed call. So I'm generally rooting for the officials. And I guess you could look at it like my team always loses, but I look at it like my team always. So,
there you go.
I don't have any predictions, to be quite frank, because there were so many different things that could happen. And I guess that's what makes sports and hockey so interesting is who knows what's going to happen. But, when you do think about what's being missed out on, I look at last year and I guess last year in that case, Minnesota Duluth won their back-to-back national championship. What story was going to happen this year? Cale Makar had that great year all year long, caps it off with the Hobie, plays in the national championship game. 2 days later, he's in the NHL playoffs and scores a goal. Those stories would have happened this year. We just don't know which ones they were. Yeah. Or on the NHL side, you think of the St. Louis Blues and everything they went through, and all the great aspects to that story, whether it was Layla or the Gloria or the comeback in the overtime game and all that stuff that happened. And then even here locally with the Whitecaps and the magical season they had last year. None of those stories are happening this year. We just don't know which one it was going to be.
I know it is. It's sad. Like, what do we talk about then? Like, what do we choose? Where's our entertainment? And you touched on the organization. Tell folks a little bit about College Hockey Inc. and what you guys exactly do for the sport and how you're really helping promote and get more exposure for NCAA hockey.
We just celebrated our 10th anniversary this year, and I've been with the organization, if I do my math here, about 7.5 of those 10 years. We're a small nonprofit. There's 3 of us. I have a colleague, Nate Ewell, who's in the New England area, just outside Boston. Another colleague, Sean Hogan, who's at the USA Hockey National Development Program offices in the Detroit area. And then I'm here in Minnesota, and my office is with the Minnesota Wild. We're a nonprofit. I guess you could say what we're supposed to do is promote and grow college hockey with a particular slant towards men's hockey, only because there are options and opportunities for young male hockey players in the 14, 15, 16, even 17-year-old range where they can lose their amateur eligibility and essentially be ineligible for college hockey before they even have a chance to get there. That doesn't exist for women's hockey. So a lot of what we do, and the foundation, I would say, of what we do is make sure that young players are educated about what they can do, what they can't do to maintain both their amateur eligibility, but also their academic eligibility. And then we have a few other aspects that we do. And one piece that we get asked questions about quite a bit is the growth of college hockey. What programs, men's or women's, or both, are what schools are considering adding college hockey.
You know, that leads into our next. We kind of touched on LIU recently adding a program. I mean, is it so exciting to see college hockey continue to grow and continue a trend? I mean, it started with the Big Ten and having a big conference backing now and getting more exposure there. And, you know, Illinois and other schools are talking and seriously considering adding college hockey. I mean, how exciting is it to see it start to grow, and where do you see it going in the next even 5 years?
Well, I think it's very exciting. Granted, I'm biased, but I think it says a lot about the game in general. It says a lot about the game in the United States, and then it says a lot about college hockey in particular. And as great as it is for just simply for college hockey, I also think it's critical for the growth of hockey in our country, because we're such a college athletics-based culture in the United States. You know, a lot of kids play football because of Alabama or Ohio State, and a lot of kids play basketball because of Kansas or Duke. So, you know, we need more inspirational programs throughout the country to, I guess, get kids, girls and boys, to see the sport and think about playing it. And probably even more so than football and basketball, hockey requires a little more of a push for a family to get their child to try that sport for a variety of reasons. You know, the facilities, it's not a running-based sport. It's so we could talk about that for so long. So what we need to have happen is more examples of schools adding hockey. So, you know, you might know that we're working on a project, and now the University of Illinois is it's their project, and they are hopefully going to add men's hockey at some point here. And we know if they do, it will likely be received just as well as Penn State hockey has been received, men's and women's, and Arizona State men's program. And that's great for the development of the 24 players that get to play on that team. But what I think is cool is all the kids that are going to go watch that team, and hopefully some of them are going to tell their mom or dad that they want skates instead of tennis shoes to wear for their sport. So I think it's exciting in many ways, and the part that excites me the most is simply the influence it'll have on the furthering growth of hockey in our country.
So I thought you made a really good point about how college sports is such a big part of our culture here, and it really shapes people and pushes them into athletic careers. And taking that info, what do you think that means for the suspended season? A lot of players, especially for the players who are maybe still growing into their athleticism or still maturing to that point where they were maybe on the cusp of going pro at some point, or maybe not. What does that mean for those players, or the ones who this was their last year playing a college sport, and now that's done? They don't get a chance to redo that. It's either into the pros now, or I guess I should say the minors, or you're just done with sports at that level at all. How do you think that really affects these players who are still growing at this age?
Well, I don't think it's good. And it's tough because especially right now or I suppose we're past it now, but that end of the season, that kind of that mid-March through early April, when seasons are coming to an end, and schools' seasons end at different times just based on how far they go in the playoffs. That's such a big time for players to sign pro contracts, whether it's NHL or minor league, and then go and get their feet wet and become familiar with the program. And sometimes, like, you know, you get a situation like Cale Makar where you step right into the NHL playoffs and you play a bunch of NHL playoff games. And usually it's not like that, but it's something similar to that. But then players know, okay, now I know where I'm going to be next year. I've just signed a contract with the Colorado Avalanche or with an AHL team or an East Coast League team. And now they're part of that team preparing for the next year. You've seen less of that this year, especially with players that didn't have their rights already owned by a team, because everybody, not just the athlete, but the professional teams don't know what to expect next year. And in fact, I just read today that the AHL, and I don't know how accurate this is, but some consideration that they might not play next year. So there's so many questions. There's no answers. Stuff changes daily. That I think really you just have to take it literally day by day, and just whatever resources you have available to yourself, even if it's just a garage with the tarp hanging up and you can go shoot pucks endlessly, you just have to do what you can do within your environment to try to continue to get better.
So many questions and no answers has got to be the motto of 2020, if I ever heard one. I mean, that about sums it all up right there.
Yeah, you're right.
You know, you mentioned Cal McCarr, and I mean, you can look at NHL rosters, and there are more and more college hockey players going into the NHL, and even unrestricted, unsigned players. Like you said, Scott Perunovich, I believe, was never drafted, and he's, eligible to now sign with the team. I mean, talk a little bit about how college hockey has really established itself as a premier development path for players. You no longer have to go play juniors up in Canada in order to reach that next level of your career.
It's real. Well, it really speaks to the number of Americans playing hockey, just the growth of Americans, because it is such a cultural thing for an American person to, whether they're a hockey player, basketball player, volleyball athlete, whatever it might be that you're pursuing it in college, likely. But I think it really reflects what being a college hockey player affords you at a very critical point in your hockey life. Depending on when you enter, you're in it anywhere from age 18 to 23 or 24 years old. But it does skew more what I would call development oriented and a little less performance oriented. In other words, you're going to play 40 to 45 games instead of 80 games. But you're going to be in the ice more because you're going to practice more. And then also you complement that with the amount of time you get in the weight room and the off-ice training and stuff. So really I think the hockey environment you get while you're on campus is unlike anything you've probably done before it, and certainly anything you'll do after it. So it allows you to cook and develop, and then it also gives you a longer runway. So if you don't choose to play college hockey, you absolutely have to turn pro at 20 or 21. And pro hockey skews very much towards performance hockey. It's 80 games. You guys both follow the Wild. You see how rarely the Wild really practice, and when they do practice, is it an hour and 45 minutes skill-based practice? Generally not, because they either are recovering from a game or preparing for a game. And the college environment allows you to have a lot of really intense practices. But then you wrap it and everything else, and then you're able to do it until you're 23 or 24. If you want to do it until you're 23 or 24, if you're Jack Eichel, you can get off at 19 and turn pro. But if you're Scott Perunovich and you want to play 3 years, if you're Alex Iafallo and want to play 4 years, there's so many examples of just being able to have more development time if you feel that's what's appropriate for you.
Well, graduation rate. Hockey players lead the way in NCAA graduation rate too, because they have value in their bachelor's degree. And I still love how Keith Ballard went back and got his degree. I mean, you see that so often from hockey players who do recognize they still want to earn their degree and have that as a fallback, because sports don't last forever, right?
Well, almost everybody's done by age 40. This year, I think there was one player playing over the age of 40, Zdeno Chara. So even the player that's going to have the 20-year NHL career will be done by age 40. But yeah, the graduation rate for men is 92%. For women, I think it's 94%. It's sky high. I know it's generally number 1, 2, or 3 in terms of comparisons to all NCAA athletics, and the ones that it competes with are like soccer and fencing and skiing. And so it is highly academic. Yet you see more and more players every year moving on and making such an impact in the NHL or in the NWHL.
Well, we talked about Scott Sandlin, I think it was, had mentioned how some players, there are those players that are maybe seniors, that their season was cut short. And there was obviously early on the discussion, are they eligible to come back and finish a season? Or are they, how do you navigate that? And I think Pat Micheletti had mentioned that Sandy was like, but I don't want the players to come back. Some of these guys are ready to move on. Some of these guys do need to take that next step in their career too. So I admire coaches that can recognize that. I think Mike Hastings was another one that said, no, I want my players, the ones that are ready for that next step. The ones that aren't, we'll have that discussion, but you don't want to hold a guy back either that maybe could make that next step.
Yeah. I think every college hockey coach wants their players to succeed and thrive as high and as far as they can professionally, whatever that might be. The statistics do strongly indicate that a third year for most every player is very critical. And actually the statistics don't suggest that fourth year is nearly as critical as that third year is. 70% of all of the, at least in the NHL, of all of the men that played college hockey and are now in the NHL, 70% of them played at least 3 years. So I think they want to make sure that they have the right information. But at the same time, I think they love to see their players move on and have success. And even if that is leaving after 3 years,
So what about at the NWHL level? We've got, a sixth team was just added to the NWHL in Toronto. We've got 5 American teams, obviously Minnesota being one of them. How do you think that affects the college hockey for women, now having an expanding league and a lot of players signing out of college into this league? Obviously the pay and stuff is very different from the NHL and a lot of other differences as well, but it's a league they can play in professionally coming out of college. Do you think that we'll see a growth in women's hockey at the college level because of a growing NWHL?
I hope so. And women's college hockey has grown quite a bit. And in fact, you brought up Long Island. They had a women's program a year ago, had a really good first season. And that formed essentially a new conference called the NWHA. I believe it's 6 schools all concentrated out in the New England area or the East Coast. So I hope so. I think any kind of growth of women's and girls hockey can lead to future growth. I'd like to get into a scenario where you find more, more models like Minnesota for girls hockey. And sometimes it looks like girls youth hockey is even more accelerated than boys youth hockey elsewhere, meaning you have these youth teams, and we're talking like 14-year-old girls, and they're girls coming from all corners of the country. And so just the investment, both financially, time-wise, and life-wise, can appear so steep, I think, to a family with a young girl that they might just avoid having their daughter sign up for it. So I think there are other factors to really get women's hockey to reach its full growth. But certainly having another team and more. That's 6 teams. I think hopefully we could someday, get to 8 or 10, pretty quickly.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answered what you were asking, but
no, that does. Yeah. Yeah, you made a lot of good points, especially at the younger level where things need to happen there, because it really does start no matter what sport you're talking about or what area in the world you're talking about. You got to start when they're young, and making changes there so that they have a chance to succeed as they get older is important, because growing a talented athlete does not start when they're 18, 19, 20. It starts when they're 5, 6, 7 learning ththese skills. And so it is important that those opportunities are available when they're young.
Well, and they have to see it too.
One player I'm intrigued by, Taylor Heisey is over at the U.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've read some stories about her. I've never met her, so some of this might be wrong, but I believe she grew up in Lake City, was playing basketball and outdoor hockey, and liking both or loving both. And then she decided to commit full-time to hockey, like in her early teens or somewhere around there. And then she ended up playing at Red Wing. Red Wing girls hockey, I don't think is considered a powerhouse. And yet here she is now, easily one of the best women in the world, one of the best female college hockey players. And the lesson there is she was in an environment where she showed interest and she was able to do it. And she didn't have to commit, her family didn't have to commit everything financially or time to her playing hockey. Okay. And she wasn't in Edina. She wasn't in Minnetonka. So, but she had some natural ability clearly, but a lot of passion and the opportunity to play. And I guess I wish we would have kind of that view. Let's create a lot more of those around the country, just so that more girls play the sport. You had Natalie Darwitz on a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah. And
I think she's like just such a treasure for our state, for girls hockey, and for how she sees things. I mean, she has accomplished everything you can accomplish as an athlete. And certainly her hockey world is the entire world. She's multiple times, national teams, highest level of college hockey. Yet you can tell the passion when she talks about playing for Egan, whether it was youth hockey or high school hockey. So and there's others, Neil Broughton, people like that you can just see that power of that. And I think sometimes we get away from how important that inspiration is. And I don't really know where I'm going with this, other than I think Taylor Heisey is such a good example. That's too often we get all wrapped up in somebody having to always play with the best and against the best. Really what I look at is the most important piece to a hockey player's development is that they chose hockey when they were 6. If we create these environments where Taylor decides to stick with basketball or some other sport, we never realize what a great hockey player she was, or she is.
Right. Well, and I mean, at the end of the day, the cream always rises to the top. You don't have to go to these, big schools. You don't have to transfer. You don't have to move. You don't have to do this. If you are good, they will find you, right? Like you can be from Red Wing and be an elite. I mean, you can be the big fish in a little pond or small fish in a big pond.
I would say that you're sometimes better off being from those places because
stand out more.
The pressure there is probably to play multiple sports because not only are you our best hockey player, you're our best football player, volleyball player, our best softball player, baseball player. Whereas at, a big place with, there's more pressure to specialize early. And in the long run, specializing early, according to people a lot smarter than me, certainly lead to a lesser outcome down the road for you as a hockey player and as an athlete. So I think those pieces are pretty critical, but, and so I think I brought this up all because you asked about, what will having that Toronto franchise mean? It'll mean a lot. But I think what will mean just as much is if a girl sees that Toronto team or sees the Whitecaps or whatever and says, hey, Dad, hey, Mom, I want to play hockey. Okay, well, when that parent looks into it, is it inviting, accessible? Is it there for them? Or is it like shell out $20,000 and travel North America 8 times a year going to tournaments?
Yeah.
Right. Well, and that leads into this. I know, Mike, you and I have had this conversation with our relationship with Minnesota Hockey and USA Hockey, the community-based model here in Minnesota. And yes, hockey is an expensive sport, but explain to folks listening, like in comparison in Minnesota, it's so affordable, right? Because we have the community-based model and we have the accessibility to community rinks. I mean, tell folks a little bit about that dynamic and how important and special hockey really is here in Minnesota.
Well, my job with Cawlidge Hockey Inc., it's a pretty cool job. So I'm lucky as heck. And a lot of it entails traveling around North America and really getting to become immersed into youth and amateur hockey throughout the country and Canada as well. And hockey people are great people, wherever they're from, whether it's Minnesota, Michigan, Massachusetts, British Columbia, California. That's pretty consistent. It's really a good group of people to be involved with. But it has also revealed to me, much more so than before this job, I didn't realize, I took for granted a lot of what we have here in our state in terms of how affordable the sport is, how accessible it is, how something as simple as you get to live at your home throughout your entire childhood. That's not common in a lot of places. If you are an aspiring young hockey player, a lot of them definitely are moving away by 16 or 17, and that's just getting younger and younger now. And you see kids leaving their home at 13 or 14 to go live with a different family somewhere else to play youth hockey. And so many of our athletes just get to stay at home, and all of them could if they wanted to, because we've set up what I kind of call a cradle to grave childhood hockey environment, where from age 5 to age 18, you essentially have a place to play. You don't have to think about it. This is where I play. And frequently the team name when you're 5 is the same as the team name when you're 18. In your case, Jess, where you grew up, I bet the majority of those boys that just won the Matamidi state championship when they were 5 and 6, they were playing for Matamidi, right? And then, by the way, there was like a little tweet I saw from Matamidi a couple of days ago where they said, just looking back on the state championship, and they intermingled it with some video footage of Matamidi youth hockey. Did you see that at all?
I'll have to take a peek. But
yeah, and the whole time they're playing the state of hockey anthem in the background, and I'm sure this wasn't their intent. They were just putting together some good video, but it just screamed to me community hockey. They showed 6-year-olds in Matamidi jerseys, and then they showed the 18-year-olds celebrating the overtime goal. But anyway, back to what you're saying is we fortunately have, and without doubt, the most important reason why this works in Minnesota is because we have so many community-owned ice arenas. I think almost every full-size sheet of ice in the state of Minnesota, with the exception of 2 or 3, are publicly owned. So some call it the state of hockey. I call it the people's state of hockey. Because, the sport's subsidized by the government. None of these rinks really make money. But fortunately, our voters in this state kind of equate a community ice arena to a playground or to the fire department. It's just something that you got to have if you're a town in Minnesota. And elsewhere, that's not the case, especially elsewhere in the United States. The prevailing way elsewhere is that it's a privately owned arena. and you're generally playing for a club where there is some kind of financial motive to that. And that doesn't mean that they're bad people. It doesn't mean the coaching isn't great. It all is. And that they don't love hockey. That's all true there. But it just means the financial cost of doing it's higher. The time commitment's higher. The motives might be a little different. And that's just kind of the way it is. So here we're so fortunate to have that network of community on ice sheets. And then from that, what springs from that is just this desire and excitement of playing for your community, playing for state championships, whether it's at the, Pee Wee 12U level or the 15U band level or all the way up in high school for boys and girls. And then suddenly it just becomes such a desired and an inspired thing to play for that next level up as a youth, as a young player. So I don't know if I really answered what you were looking for, Jess, but I think it all starts with the way our rinks are owned, and then just how inviting the sport looks to people and how connected it is to the community. And one piece of that is if I say certain town names, like if I just started going War Road, Roseau, Hermantown, Edina, South St. Paul, Cloquet, Blaine, right away, I bet if you play word association, a lot of people just hockey. I find elsewhere, not the case, because you don't play for the name of the town. You play for a sponsor. You play
Little Caesars or right. Yep. Exactly. Well, like you said, like there's that association when you're a little kid. It's, you want to play for your high school team. Those are your role models, right? Like you brought up Matamita, and obviously go Zeffs. But I mean, you could say that about any school and any association. I mean, there's that direct correlation. And you mentioned the Minnesota Hockey state tournaments. It's so fun to look back. I get to work on that program every year with Minnesota Hockey, and you look at the teams that won state in their youth, and then, a couple years down the road, they're at the state tournament for the high school, and it's all those same kids together. And that's what makes that high school tournament so special. I think folks don't really take a step back and wonder why it's so special. It's because this is, it's our state sport, but it's also the dreams of these little kids who were running around the rink, wearing that garb, wearing that gear. And now they get to look at these guys like they're role models. You'd venture to say it's bigger than professional hockey to a lot of kids. That's, more realistic goal too, to make the varsity team, forget pros, forget college. It's just so special. I think I urge folks to remember that, think about why the sport means something to us. It's a really special thing.
I guess I'm more vocal about it, obviously, with Jess. You've heard me before, but because I do think that if we lose it, it's not coming back. Because if you look at the statistics, Minnesota has far greater output of NHL players, women playing D1, men playing D1. Whatever kind of measurement you want to come up with, except one area that we don't lead in, and I think that's people making a nice living off of youth hockey. It still is very volunteer based. There are good people out there that are private coaches or whatever, and that's fine. But it still really is volunteer, nonprofit driven. But if we lose that, and some places used to have what we have, and they lost it, and now they give anything to bring it back, they can't, because the infrastructure has changed from that community nonprofit to a for-profit model, and the people making that profit, it's a pretty good life for them. So they control the ice, they control the hockey. They're not going to shift it back.
Well, and I think that, I don't know about you guys, but at least when I was growing up, I kind of thought the community-based model was how every state did it. I just thought that, this is how you grow up. You play hockey. You play, like you said, at the youth level for one city, and you play for that city when you're in high school, and then you go to college, and so on and so on. And I don't really think I fully understood until I got to late high school, the college level, that it's not like that everywhere. We're pretty lucky to have that, and that's why Minnesota is such a big hockey place, and why we put out so many great hockey players at the men's and women's level, from college to high school to professional. And I know I had a friend in college, one of my good friends, he listens to the podcast. So Robbie, if you're listening, hey, I went to St. Cloud State for college, and so I got to be around a lot of very talented hockey players at St. Cloud State, and he played for the men's team there, and he's now in the minors playing. And I remember having a conversation with him one time where he was like, I've been on my own since I was 15 because I was playing. He's from California. That was the main point of the story, and I left that out. He's from California, the Bay Area. And he's like, I've been on my own since I was 15 to play hockey. He's like, I had to move around. I didn't get to live with my parents. And that was when it really clicked with me. I was like, oh, people in other states and other areas don't get the same things we do when it comes to hockey, where, like you said, they can live at home until they're a certain age and they have to move on to play, juniors or whatever it may be. So it is really crazy how lucky we are. And like you said, that we have to really value that, because if it goes away, it might be a while, if ever, if we get that back. And that's part of what makes this community so special.
Well, and I remember talking to Charlie Coyle about that too a couple times, because we work with Massachusetts hockey, and I was like, I don't understand their state structure, like how their state tournament work. Like, I think I'd asked him that every season, like every fall, every spring, and he would always try to explain it to me. He's like, I don't get it either, because it's a very different thing. Yeah. I mean, and it's unlike, Minnesota is unlike anybody else, and we're so fortunate to have that model. And I think you'll start to see, or the hope is you will start to see other states emulate after Minnesota and maybe put more stock in their youth associations and in the grassroots, and hope that you stay and play for your high school. And again, it does, like Mike, you said, it makes it more affordable too when you have the whole communities invested into the sport too.
That is, Jess, I mean, Mass and New England are filled with great hockey people.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully they can make it happen. And but Alexis, you talked about the number of good players that come from Minnesota, which is true, but I think it's equally as important. We also lead the country in lightly skilled players too, because we have a place for everybody to play.
Yeah.
And then you get involved, you keep playing, and I'm on the board at the Hockey Association where I live in Minneapolis. And what's pretty cool is, we have the same number of Bantam teams that we have squirt teams, which tells me that squirts don't they don't quit. Even if they're the lightly skilled players, it's affordable, it's fun. It's not, the parent isn't saying, well, he's not demonstrating a lot of skill, so let's pull him out of the sport because it costs so much money. They just kind of keep playing and keep playing. We had for the first time ever, we had 4 10U girl teams this year, and we'll carry that through. So I think it's not just that, there's going to be somebody that's going to get through and play in the NHL or the NWHL or Cawlidge. It's that these people are going to have hockey as part of their entire childhood. And, it's just the cultural aspect of what that means. So I think it isn't, I tend to find myself focusing a lot on the high end output, but the low end output, which I'm part of, is just as important.
Yeah.
Were you a hockey player? I've never even asked. Did you
No,
play
actually, I was a hockey player, but I never played organized hockey. I grew up in Duluth, and I also have Mother Nature to thank that we had access to a lot of hockey. So I played a ton of hockey. I still play a ton of hockey, but I actually never played organized hockey. So like you said, Alexis, I just thought every place did it this way, and I found out it's not the case.
Yeah.
I know you focus a lot on the Division I side of things with College Hockey Inc., but I mean, talk a little bit about how Division II and Division III continue to grow and how they continue to provide those opportunities for players that maybe aren't, skilled enough to make the limited roster spots at D1, but especially here in Minnesota too, our D3 and D2 programs are tremendous.
So, back to the foundation of what we do, which is men's focus, because every 17-year-old girl, whether she realizes it or not, whether she's in Minnesota or Canada or Massachusetts, they're eligible as an amateur athlete. Okay, so should they get to a point where they're good enough to play college hockey, whether it's Division I or Division III, they'll have that opportunity. It's with the boys at that younger age that sometimes they can become ineligible, and maybe they knew they were becoming ineligible, maybe they didn't. Okay, so that's who we focus in on. And at that point, it's not like we just talk to all of them, and whether when they become 18, 19, or 20, they're the most recruited player in men's college hockey, or whether it's Division III, they're going to find themselves going into like a MIAC school, or maybe even it's ACHA club hockey, which has over 500 teams throughout the country and is wonderful too. They'll settle into whatever it is. Our goal is just to ensure that if they want to remain eligible, they know what they can and can't do. And so it isn't all just about Division I to me, for men's or women's. It is the experience you can get at Division III. I brought up earlier, you had Natalie on a couple of weeks ago. We'll look at the great experience that she's giving those young women at Hamlin, which is a Division III school. And probably none of them are going to play in the NWHL. Probably none of the men on Hamlin's team are going to play in the NHL, but I guarantee you they're having just as good an experience, that the bonds and the relationships that they're creating with their teammates are just as strong as they would be if they were on a Division I team.
100%. I'm a Iowa Stater, so I'm a proud Cyclone Hockey, which is ACHA, but it was, they took it very seriously. Like, I know, shout out to some of our Cyclone Hockey guys that listen to this.
Dr. Al Murdoch.
Dr. Al Murdoch. Yes, exactly. Coach Murdoch. But no, I mean, they have the World University Games through USA Hockey for ACHA players. So there's still always opportunities to wear that Team USA crest for some of those guys. And it was just, it gives them an opportunity to continue to play, which I think is the most important thing, right? We all want to stay kids a little bit longer. We all want to keep playing the sport for as long as we can. And even if that's in a pick-up adult league or whatever, it's pretty remarkable to see all the opportunities that continue to be made available to folks. I want to poke this bear because I'm a big supporter, obviously, of growth of hockey, right? No matter what that means. And I loved the WCHA. Of course, that's what we grew up with, right? North Dakota versus Minnesota. It was tremendous. And then Penn State joins, right? And then now the Big Ten. And folks are still very disgruntled over that move. Whereas, I try to remind people, you want the sport to grow, it needs to have change and it needs to happen. And it's good. There is good behind this. Can you further explain why Big Ten hockey is a good thing for college hockey and why it is good for our sport?
On the growth piece of that you brought up, mentioned earlier that we've had some good conversations, and a lot more than that, with Illinois. And Illinois, as has been documented out there, it's not a secret. They are pursuing adding, for now, men's hockey, not yet women's hockey, but for now, men's hockey. You'd have to ask them, you'd have to ask their athletics director, but I'm pretty confident saying that I don't think they would be pursuing hockey if their conference didn't offer hockey. Okay. So that's an aspect of it. And then I think that getting other schools in the Big Ten to offer hockey, and I can't really name any universities, but getting some of the ones that don't currently offer it to offer it. What does it
rhyme with? How about no?
Well, I think when a school's going to look at it, they're just so much more likely to look at it if their conference offers the sport.
100%.
Well, all of the other Big Ten schools now are, I'm not going to say any of them are very likely to add it, but they're more likely now, much more likely now than they were before. And, Illinois has looked at what Penn State has done. They're very successful off the ice, very successful on the ice. Everybody involved at Penn State would absolutely tell any school, like, oh, you got to do it. If you can figure out a way to do it, do it. It'll impact your university. You'll love it. Your alumni will love it. It'll be such an important part of, being a student at Penn State. And so we just need to duplicate that over and over. And having a multi-sport conference like the Big Ten offer hockey makes that a more doable thing.
Mm-hmm. Jessi and I talked about this on the episode where we kind of talked about this and shamed everyone for being mad about the WCHA being gone. But well, I said, I was like, it's not a bad thing to have new rivalries too, and root for new rivalries. It sucks that some of those old ones that we grew up watching and loved watching and have some great games from are not going to be happening anymore. But then you look ahead and you say, well, that doesn't mean that there's never going to be rivalries again or games worth watching again. You got new rivalries and you bring new teams in, and then they create new rivalries. So I think a lot of people forget that, it's not that it's going to be gone forever. It's just going to shift. It's going to be different. It's just a lot of leagues rearrange divisions and stuff like that over time. The NHL has done it. I mean, it happens all the time. So I think a lot of people, obviously we're nostalgic creatures. We love what we had, and we don't want things that we like to go away. But in the long run, you love the sport, you want it to grow. That's the ultimate goal. And sometimes shifting things around and offering new opportunities to new schools is how it has to happen.
Yeah, I think you're right there. To me, the world was perfect when I was 12, and I think that's the case for everybody. When I see the New York Islanders jersey, I still see a dynasty.
Yeah.
When I was 12, they were winning their 4th cup. So I think that we can tend to do what you just kind of said. We like nostalgia and might be averse to change, but at the same time, I understand fans that, loved things like that. You brought up the Minnesota-North Dakota rivalry, or maybe the old tournament that happened in St. Paul and stuff like that. So I see both sides of it, but I'm excited about the continued growth and success of the Big Ten, and they're having success. A couple of years ago, 3 of the 4 teams in the Frozen Four were Big Ten teams.
Yeah.
So, and I'm pretty bullish on, I guess, the future of all of college hockey.
Yeah.
I better be. It's my job.
Yeah. And we haven't really even mentioned even ASU. I love that ASU has a team, because Penn State, that's kind of a hockey area, right? And to put a Division I team in a non-traditional hockey market is huge for the sport there. I mean, you look at Austin Matthews being from Arizona too. And I can't remember who said it. I believe it might've been like Jack Eichel. He's like, who wouldn't want to go to ASU and play Division I hockey? Like, it's a great school. It's a great area to live. It is. It's just, I think, again, hockey fans get so wound up about people not paying attention to our sport, but then you have to let it grow and you have to let it expand, and you have to be okay with doing that. I know we had mentioned I constantly yell at my mother, because if it were up to her, there'd only be 6 teams. Minnesota would always be the only hockey play, like you have to let it grow, and you have to be able to shift. It has to evolve.
I think we want it to grow. And first, I think, I haven't done it yet, but USA Hockey, in partnership with the NHL, they deserve so much credit for what they have done to grow the sport from our participation standpoint throughout the country. Yeah. When you look at, what we do a lot of research, obviously we break down college rosters, where do the players come from, and the number of California natives, Arizona natives, Texas natives, Florida natives playing big time college hockey is impressive. And at one time, I think most people would have said would never happen. So you really need to give the NHL credit for moving or not moving, but adding teams in markets like San Jose, Las Vegas, Nashville, Tampa, Dallas. I mean, they're so successful in those places. And as we said right at the beginning, hockey, it isn't basketball, it isn't soccer in the way where it's almost a guarantee that every kid in the country will somehow sample basketball, whether it's shooting in a gym at their school or shooting at a hoop in a driveway. Every kid's going to touch a basketball and at least sample it. And that's not the case for hockey. Yeah. So we need more things like the San Jose Sharks and the Arizona State Sun Devils to get families and kids in those areas to look at the sport and think it's pretty cool. And I love that our governing body, USA Hockey, had a vision to take it beyond Massachusetts, Michigan, and Minnesota, and to think like, hey, people can play this sport everywhere. And I love that the NHL followed suit and put all those NHL teams in those various markets. And honestly, I think it's our turn now. We've been the ones that haven't been doing our fair share of college hockey. I mean, so we need to go into those places and get Arizona States and the next UCLA and USC and Texas, and get those schools playing, because they have such powerful brands and they mean so much to so many of their alumni, that let's take our sport and let's put it in their colors, and then have their alumni bases of 400,000 people suddenly fall in love with Arizona State hockey. And I'll tell you one thing, go to an Arizona State road game. They were here at Mariucci Arena in Minneapolis 2 years ago, or anytime they go out to the New England area a lot. The number of ASU alumni that go to those games is noteworthy. Yeah. And most of these alumni, when they were there, did not have hockey. So they're racing this team. So imagine if ASU makes like I talked earlier about what was the story that was going to happen this year that we won't know. Maybe it would have been ASU winning the national championship. Maybe it would have been Little Caesars Arena in Detroit filled with 10,000 maroon and gold ASU alum cheering on their hockey team, and then suddenly getting all of their 6-year-old girls and boys, their children into the sport. So that's kind of the vision. And I know that's a lot, and that's 10 steps down the future. But if someone says, what are you trying to accomplish with this? I would say that in 20 years, Oregon is hosting Washington late in February, and the Pac-12 title's on the line.
I was just going to ask about the Pac-12, because I've heard rumblings that there is discussion, especially now with the NHL Seattle franchise too. What's that going to spawn? I mean, do you see other big conferences following Big Ten suit, hopefully down the road, and really considering Division I hockey and getting behind it a little bit more?
I hope so. And I know hope's not a great business plan. And I acknowledge that there's a pandemic going on right now that is doing all sorts of damage to our economy, especially to how universities will conduct themselves. But at the same time, this was a long-term project from the start, so it continues to be a long-term project. I'll tell you, I've never once spoken to somebody in the Pac-12 office, so if there are rumblings, I'm not aware of it. But I do think the best way to get them to think about it eventually is to get one of their schools, in this case Arizona State, to add the sport. That happened, to get them to succeed at it. And they're succeeding on the ice, and soon they'll have a beautiful arena, so they'll also have all the photos of 5,000 fans watching their games to go with it. So it is a step-by-step process, and just building and creating momentum. So it's not going to happen next year or even in 2 years, but that is part of what we're trying to do, is to fill in the gaps where there's NHL teams, and just like college basketball, let's say, let's go fill in the gaps and create other teams that people will love and be inspired by, and ultimately lead to more people playing the sport.
100%. Well, Mike, we really appreciate having you on. Talking a little college puck. We'll definitely get you back on maybe when college hockey can resume, maybe when hockey resumes, life resumes, the whole world starts turning again. But you're the best, as always. Love hearing you.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate the opportunity.
Of course. Well, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back. Thanks again to Mr. Mike Snee. He's awesome. I absolutely adore talking to him. We do a lot of work with him and Nate Ewell for College Hockey Inc. Really great stuff. Love promoting NCAA hockey and all college hockey. It's exciting to see where it's going. So we'll keep tabs on him. But before we end and wrap this episode, here's Dear Diary with Alexis.
Congrats to Chug Kobasu as well for getting his first NHL goal in nearly 3 months.
And that's Dear Diary with Alexis. My God, you are savage.
I'm so sorry, Chug. Why did I put him on blast like that? I don't even know what that's all about. I'm so sorry.
Amazing. And again, as a reminder for people that don't know what this is Alexis's hockey journal that she writes in pre-Twitter. How old were you?
This is probably I was probably 10, 11 at the time.
Amazing. Yeah.
So it's funny because when I was reading through these and picking out good quotes for this segment or for this bit, I read that one and I was like, congrats to Chug Kobasu on getting his first NHL goal. And I looked at the date. I'm like, was his first NHL goal really on this date? I feel like he was in the league longer. And sure enough, I keep reading. I'm like, in nearly 3 months. I was like, wow, I even got myself. I was the one who wrote this, and I tricked myself.
It's amazing. So I love it. I absolutely love it. So again, thanks to everybody that joined us. Thanks to everyone to tune in. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, share, give us some love. We keep trying to grow this thing. Let us know what you guys want to hear. If there's something you want us to talk about, if you have questions that you want us to ask players or coaches, we can't promise that we'll do that, but we could try. And
we'll sure as heck try. We'll give it a good old college effort.
Exactly. So again, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, all of our social medias. We've got special exclusives on our Instagram and Facebook. So again, we're just trying to grow the damn thing, because we do, but we appreciate every single one of you. Shout out to Fred, who will work his butt off putting this together. We missed you. We missed your little insight, seeing your little face down here. So
I missed getting bullied by you, Fred.
I know. That's his role, right? Is to be like, what the hell, Alexis?
Someone has to do it. I can't get away with all this stuff. I mean, honestly, someone needs to call me out.
Yeah. So thanks again, everyone. Thanks to sodastick.com for being our presenting sponsors and just being kick-ass peeps. We love you. Tune in next week. Have a good one. Near.